Yes, welcome to our geography lesson. This morning, I want to say good morning to you all that are attending. Last week, we introduced ourselves to a new topic that was coastal landforms, where we are looking at the features, the physical features, or the landforms that form along the coast. And we said these landforms are majorly categorized into four. We said we have those which are erosional, those which are formed as a result of wave erosion. Then we also mentioned those that form due to wave deposition. And then we also have those that form as a result of changes in sea level. And then the last category, we said we have coral landforms or coral reefs. And then we said that to understand their formation requires us to look at them in their different categories. And the first category we looked at last week was wave erosional landforms. And we said waves are simply ripples or oscillations of water on the sea surface. And then this water moves towards the coast, erodes the coast. And when it erodes the coast therefore develops new shapes which give us landforms. And we said this process of erosion by waves takes place in four main processes. And we said we have hydraulic action, where the force of the water breaks rocks from the coast. We said we have solution or corrosion, where we have soluble rock materials getting dissolved in the waters of the waves and carried away in solution form. We said we have abrasion or corrosion, where we said the particles of eroded materials hit against the coast and therefore break other loose rock particles. Then we also said we have attrition, where the particles that have been eroded and are being carried by the waves keep colliding with one another and progressively or gradually break down into further smaller particles. And we said that through those processes, the following landforms are formed, among which you said we have a cliff, said we have a wave cut platform, we said we have a cave, a blowhole, a gear, said bays and headlands, have an arch, a stack, and a stump. Those are some of the features that form as a result of wave erosion along the coast. Now today, we want to also go to the second category of landforms. We shall be a little faster because we need to handle all the other categories in this lesson so that we can prepare for something new. This time we want to start by looking at wave depositional landforms or features that form along the coast. Those ones have been erosional. Now, what about those that form as a result of deposition? We said that when waves erode, they carry the materials through the swash. Wave swash, you said that is a forward movement of the water or of the wave towards the coast. And then when the water hits the coast, it moves back. So as it moves back, we said that is the backwash. Now, at times, waves bring materials along the coast. These materials are weathered rock particles or broken down rock particles. There are other living organisms, plants and shells of water organisms may all be carried and brought towards the coast. And this usually happens because when the swash is coming, when the wave is moving towards the coast, it comes with a lot of strength. But after hitting the coast, that water draws back into what we call the backwash. But as it goes, the energy with which it was coming forward reduces. So the water goes back sluggishly at a slow speed. And therefore, sometimes the materials that the water or that the waves had brought to the coast may not be carried back into the sea. So those materials are left along the coast, and therefore they accumulate there. And when they accumulate, they develop into new landform structures that we are calling the wave depositional landforms or features. And this process of carrying materials towards the coast by the waves is what we are terming as a longshore drift. So there is a term there that we are going to use in this context of wave deposition, that the waves carry materials towards the coast in a process known as longshore drift. So in simple terms, you can say longshore drift is a process by which waves carry materials towards or to the coast. Now, as a result of this longshore drift process that we're talking about, the carrying of materials to the coast by waves, the following landforms will develop. And among them, we have what is known to all of us, that is the beach. I hope all of us know what a beach is, or have ever seen a beach. If you have ever gone to a lake shore or to the coast, for those that may have had a chance to go to the coast, you will have seen some areas along the shore or along the coast where the entire area is covered by sand. In majority of cases, we want to refer to them as sand beaches. We know of several of them in the Entebbe area, Lutembe, Lido, Sese Gateway Beach. You have and many others, of course. Now, those places along the shores of Lake Victoria are covered by sand. No, but not only sand. When you get there, you discover that within this sand there are even other materials. So we have sandy particles, we have pieces of rocks that we shall call pebbles. So we have sand, we have what we call pebbles, and we also have materials called shingle. Now shingle is basically those materials that comprise of remains of dead organisms. Say there are some plants, algae and other plants that grow in the water. There are even shells or scales of water organisms. When they die, all those materials can be brought along the shore or along the coast by waves and deposited there. So when these materials accumulate along the coast, then they form a platform, they form an area, they form a plain which is extensively covered by these materials, sand, pebbles and shingle, and therefore we refer to that area covered by those materials as a beach. So we have observed in our notes there that a beach is a coastal accumulation of sand, pebbles and shingles, or it is a coastal accumulation of wave materials, implying that materials that have been brought along the coast accumulate and then form an area which is called a beach. These materials are usually able to accumulate very fast where you have a coast or a shore which is gently sloping, so that when the waves come with its strong swashes, they bring the materials along the coast or along the shore. But because of the gentle nature of the landscape or of the coast, the water goes back sluggishly. Therefore, it leaves behind the materials that it has brought to the coast. And then those materials gradually accumulate and form a platform that is known as a beach. And we have several of them, like we mentioned earlier. Along the coast of East Africa, we have one beach called Nyali Beach, which is found in Mombasa, that is along the Kenyan coast. So it is called the Nyali Beach, among others. Then we have those that we have along the shores of Lake Victoria, like Lutembe, Lido, and etc. etc. We have an illustration in our notes there that indicate the beach. And you also have, you can watch on your screens, there is you can watch, there is a beach trying to display So we're trying to show you can access the image of a beach. Now there is some image of a beach there. Where you see the blue, that is water. You can even see some whitish, that is now a wave swash coming. And then this area towards the palm trees you see on your left, that is that white area that appears bright or whitish is simply an area covered by sand. So with the sea the other side, we have the beach. You see that flat area which is white, so the blue is the water. Now this side, the left hand side, is the beach. So that area there is what we call a beach. So a beach is one of the features that are formed as a result of wave deposition. The other feature formed as a result of wave deposition is sandbar. Just like a beach, the sandbar is a kind of an accumulation of sand, this time not at the coast, but near the coast, implying therefore that this accumulation of sand takes place within the water body, within the lake or within the sea, but near the coast. How does this happen? That we said the longshore drift is the process by which waves carry or transport the materials towards the coast. And this is basically facilitated by the wave swash, the strength of the wave, the forward movement of the wave. So when this wave moves towards the coast, its strength keeps on reducing because of the reduced depth of the sea or of the lake. So sometimes the wave is not able to bring the materials up to the coast, so that the strength of the wave to carry the materials up to the coast is limited by the shallow depth of the sea. So what happens is that the wave stops at some point, and therefore the materials that it was bringing will also remain at some point before reaching the coast. So when that happens over a long time, then the sand, the pebbles and shingles accumulate to form a ridge which lies parallel to the coast. And that ridge therefore means that we have an accumulation within the water. So between that accumulation and then the coast, there is still water. So this forms within the sea. And so we shall not call this one a beach, because the materials are not right at the coast. The materials are before the coast. That means therefore that that ridge there across the coast within the lake or within the sea is what we are terming as a sandbar. Now that part of the sea or of the lake which is behind the sandbar is enclosed. Of course that part is cut off from the lake or from the sea, and that part can be regarded as a lagoon. We have an illustration indicating, because we had the illustration, we can now compare the illustration of the beach and that of the sandbar. Because for the beach, we indicated it right at the coast. Now the sandbar is slightly far from the coast. And so that part of the water body, which is between now this accumulation, this ridge of sand and pebbles, and then that of the coast, that part there of the sea is called a lagoon. So in simple terms, a lagoon is part of the sea or lake which is enclosed, which is cut off. Because we shall even see other lagoons in some cases when we talk about these landforms. So that's what we are calling a sandbar. We also have images here that show the sandbar. So there is, I don't know whether you're able to see that image of a sandbar. You can see that so we have the water body both on the right and the left. In the between there, in the middle, we have that white accumulation of materials. So that is a sandbar. So sometimes these sandbars are also still used as the beaches are. Some people will sail from the coast, go to the sandbar. So yeah, more or less at the beach, but a beach which is far from the coast. So in simple terms, that is what we are calling a sandbar, an accumulation of sand, pebbles and shingles near the coast, which lies parallel to the coastline. And we are saying it forms because waves are unable to bring materials up to the coast, and therefore they are posted there to form that ridge. The example that we have here is one at Nabugabo on the shores of Lake Victoria. Nabugabo is in Masaka on the shores of Lake Victoria. We have an accumulation of sand before the shoreline, and because of this sandbar there, part of Lake Victoria was cut off from the main lake, and that one forms what we call a lagoon. And we said a lagoon is that part of the lake or sea which is cut off from the main water body. And when you hear of Lake Nabugabo, or people talking about Nabugabo Beach, we're talking about an area where we have a sandbar. So the part of Lake Victoria was cut off to form an independent lake called Lake Nabugabo. So Lake Nabugabo in simple terms was cut off from Lake Victoria because of the creation of a sandbar. Then we also have one at Lamu. Lamu, those who study history, you know Lamu is one of those places along the coast. So at Lamu, along the Kenyan coast, that's along the coast of East Africa in Kenya, we have also a sandbar there near Lamu. Our illustration, we have already referred to it before, so you can look at it. That illustration shows a sandbar those I'm referring to the nodes. Then the other feature or landform that we can talk of as resulting from wave deposition is called a spit. S-P-I-T, spit. Now a spit is a ridge of wave materials or wave deposits, a narrow, long ridge of sand which is attached to the coast and extends into the sea or the lake. So we have an accumulation of sand that grows from the coast and it develops or extends into the water body. In most cases, it turns out to be curved because of the effect of waves. And this mainly forms in coastal areas or shore areas that are irregular. Assuming if this was so if this is the coast, so this is our coast, so it is so irregular in shape, so sometimes materials may be brought by waves and accumulate to us. So in these areas where you have those indentations, remember when you're talking about you're talking about fishing in British Columbia, indented coast, or you talk about an irregular coastline with bays and headlands. So these headlands may attract accumulation of materials, and when the ridge develops towards the coast, towards the water body from the coast, then that ridge of sand or of wave deposit is what we call the spit. And in some cases, it forms around river mouth. So if you have a river joining the sea or the lake, and then you have an accumulation here, so this accumulation of materials will develop into a curved shape, because as the river brings its materials also into the coast, then these materials will also spread and join these wave depots. So you have a curved spit there, and sometimes that can be called a hooked spit. But let's not go into those details. What we are only mentioning here is that if you have a ridge or an accumulation of sand at the coast, and then it grows from the coast and extends into the sea or the lake, that's what we call a spit. So we say this one usually forms along indented coastlines or around river mouths. That's the point where the river joins the sea. And the examples, or we can even have images. We have images. We have that image there. Is an image that you can the formation of a spit. You can see that curved ridge. It is a line of materials, and sometimes that area becomes muddy or swampy in a way that it even attracts the growth of vegetation on its surface. So you find some area with swamp vegetation or with mangrove, especially if it is along the coast. Those that are along the coast where we have salt water, you have mangrove. Ours in the freshwater lakes, like Lake Victoria, Lake Albert, you have basically those swampy vegetation growing on that curved ridge into the water body. And we even have that illustration in our notes there, but reference can be made to examples in East Africa. For example, along the shores of Lake Albert, there is one called Tonya. and then another one called Kaiso. Kaiso is Kaiso and Tonya are all landing sites on the shores of Lake Albert, but around those places we have spits, and they are carved or hooked spits. The other feature, as we continue looking at features or landforms formed by wave deposition, the other one is called the Tombolo. In some cases, we can even say, that Tombolo is just a type of spit, but for it grows from the coast and it connects to an island. So you have an island near the coast or near the shore, and then between the coast and that island, I'm not saying highland, but I'm saying island. If you have an island, is that piece of land that is enclosed or surrounded by water. So if you have an island near the coast, and you have, so if this is our coast, and then we have an island near the coast, and then it so happens that materials begin to develop in form of a spit, you remember, begin to develop or to accumulate from the coast, and then gradually grows towards the island and connects to the island. So if this is the coast and this is our island, so this type of spit, this ridge of sand that connects the coast to the island, is what we are calling the Tombolo. So a Tombolo is just a ridge of sand, or is a spit that connects the mainland to an island. So the mainland is connected to the island, and we are saying that it forms when, or develops when, a spit grows from the coast until it eventually connects to an island near the coast. And the example we have here in East Africa can be seen at Lambu on the shores of Lake Victoria. So Lambu, you know that Lambu is one of the landing sites on the shores of Lake Victoria. That is also in Masaka. So Lambu landing site, but near Lambu landing site there is a Tombolo connecting the mainland to Lambu Island. There's also another one. There's also another one. So say Tombolo, we have one at Lambu, and then there's also another one at Chibanga. It's called the Lunkulu. So at Chibanga there is one that connects the mainland at Chibanga. I think Chibanga is in Mukono. That should be Mukono. I don't know. I'm not very sure. But then Chibanga has a spit a Tombolo. Yes, it is a spit because it is a type of spit. But we have a Tombolo there connecting the mainland to Lunkulu Island. So that Tombolo is called the Lunkulu Tombolo. In our illustration, we indicate the mainland, the sea, and then the island which is connected by that ridge. And we indicate that ridge is always swampy in nature with swampy vegetation. Because of its muddy nature, it attracts the growth of water-loving plants like papyrus, and therefore swamp vegetation occupies it. Then the other landforms, due to wave deposition, we have the mudflat. Oh, there was an image that we could also view showing a Tombolo. An image showing a Tombolo. We can see the mainland where we see the vegetation. The lower part, that is the front part, that is the foreground of that image. And then you see that ridge of sand, that white extension towards the island. So there is an island a bit far from the coast, but then there is that ridge connecting to it from the mainland. You can even see that in the image there are people on that ridge, on that spit or Tombolo, connecting from the mainland to the offshore island, an island off the shore or off the coast. So that is the image for the Tombolo. I was talking about another landform formed by wave deposition, which is a mudflat. Mudflat. We can even simply say it is a platform. It is an area which is covered by mud and silt. A muddy platform along the coast, in simple terms, because materials are deposited along the coast, but those very materials will soak water. There will be watery forming mud. So that area is not necessarily sand, but it is a muddy section along the coast. So that's what we are calling a mud flat. So these mud flats usually form in bays or across bays. So when you go to the bay, in that area, you'll even find that most bays have got swamps. They are swampy in nature. They are swampy in the sense that those areas, because of the muddy nature of the area or of the ground, then those plants that grow in muddy areas or in waterlogged areas will always be attracted there. So we have swamps. For example, we have several swamps along the shores of Lake Kyoga. So Lake Kyoga is one of the lakes that we have in East Africa that is highly surrounded by swamps because of its indented nature. It is so irregular. So within its base, there are mud flats that have attracted the growth of swamp vegetation. We also have a mud flat on the shores of Lake, on the shores of, no, not shores. We have mud flats on the coast of Tanzania, around the River Rufiji, where River Rufiji joins the Indian Ocean. We have mud flats there with the mangrove growing, because when we talk about the coast, we are talking about salt water with the mangrove, not merely these papyrus. Papyrus grows in the fresh waters. There's also an image there showing us the mud flat, although it shows us the swamp vegetation. You can see those kind of papyrus reeds growing to your left of the to the left foreground of that image. So that's what we call a mud flat. We are using the image. We are not showing the illustration here in the notes, but we have an image that you can see along the coast or along the shore. The other feature is the lagoon. We have already talked about that one, that when part of the sea or part of the lake is cut off or enclosed by sand deposits, then that part of the lake or of the sea is called a lagoon. So a lagoon is just part of the sea or lake which is enclosed by sand deposits. So where you have sandbars, like we said, where we have a sandbar forming, then behind the sandbar, part of the lake or the sea is cut off, and so it forms a lagoon. And the clear example here we can talk of, I've already mentioned that Lake Nabugabo on the shores of Lake Victoria in Masaka is an example of a lagoon lake. So part of Lake Nabugabo was sealed off from Lake Victoria, and it appears as an independent lake. There is you can view an image. We can view an image of part of the lake which has been cut off. In that image, see on your right, there is that section of water surrounded by materials or deposits, and the other side that is to your left, especially left background, you have the water body, the main water body. So part of that water body was sealed off, and therefore it forms that blue section you see, that forms a lake, which is called a lagoon lake. So the lagoon is also another feature that forms as a result of wave deposition. So we can summarily say that wave deposition, like wave erosion, is an agent of landform formation along the coast, and we said this is as a result of accumulation of materials along the coast due to longshore drift, and it forms features like the beach, the sandbar, the spit, the tombolo, the mudflats, and then the lagoons. That is the second category of landforms that form as a result of the second category of landforms that form along the coast. So we are now moving to the third category of landforms formed along the coast. Very quickly, this one is another category we said that is arising from sea level changes. Because we are done with the wave erosion, we've talked about wave deposition. Then the third category is called landforms arising from or due to sea level changes. And very briefly, this one here, sea level change, we mentioned earlier when introducing ourselves to this, we said sea level changes refer to the rise or the fall in the water levels in relation to the coast. So there are times when water levels may rise. We mentioned last time that even on the shores of Lake Victoria, the whole of 2020, we had cases of rising water levels, and people along the lake shore were displaced because their areas were flooded. Why? Because the water levels rose and then exceeded the areas where it was occupying before. Then we may also have a fall in sea level where the water may recede or may go down, maybe during seasons of prolonged drought. Even there are no rains, the rivers reduce in water volume that supply the lake or the sea with water, and say in this situation the water levels may be seen going down. Now, sea level changes give us two types of coasts, or we describe coasts that are affected by sea level changes in two forms. The first one is what we call the submerged coasts. And the other one are called the immerged coasts. Now this brings us to two concepts here: coastal submergence and coastal emergency. Coastal submergence and the other one is coastal emergency. Now this happens in this form. These two arise in the following forms: that when the sea level rises, we say the coast is submerged, because part of the coast, part of the mainland that was formerly above the water, now becomes occupied by water. So a submerged coast is one which is flooded, which is drowned by sea or lake water because of a rise in sea level. So submerged coasts form as a result of a rise in sea level. While emerged coasts are those that form when part of the coast or part of the mainland that was formerly covered by water appear above the water level because of a fall in sea level. So when the sea level falls, the coast emerges above the water. So we call that one an emerged coast. So coastal submergence and coastal emergence are as a result of sea level changes. But very briefly, without going into those many details, what characterizes each of these two types of coasts that are created as a result of sea level changes? When sea level rises and we have coastal submergence, which features do we expect to see? Which features will show to us that this area has experienced coastal submergence? It has experienced a rise in sea level. So here we have features like what we call rear. If you had a coastal area, you have this coastal area, and then the sea level rises, but within this area you also have a river valley which is joining the sea. So this is our coast. Now, in case the sea level rises, if the water levels rise, what happens is that the water of the sea will occupy this part of the coast, for example, implying therefore that even this river valley becomes drowned or covered by the waters of the sea or of the lake. And therefore, this river valley, this part of the river valley which has been drowned or flooded with the waters of the sea or the lake due to a rise in sea level is what we shall call the rear. So rear is, we can briefly say, it is a long, narrow sea inlet into the coast with steep sides. Now we have our river joining the sea. Now, this section of the river, this was formerly a river, but then when the sea level rises, we see it forming or turning into a narrow sea inlet, an extension of the sea or an extension of the water body into the coast, which is steep-sided. It is narrow, long river valley which has been drowned or flooded by sea water resulting from a rise in sea level. And at Mombasa and Dar es Salaam we have rears, and actually these areas are said to be drowned river mouth, where we have these harbors of Mombasa and Dar es Salaam along the coast of East Africa. Then the other feature also arising from a rise in sea level is called an estuary. An estuary is also a submerged or drowned river mouth with a V shape. It is a funnel-shaped river mouth which has been flooded or drowned, using this word, which has been drowned by a rise in sea level, so that when sea level rises, then the river mouth, we said the river mouth, that part of the river where it joins the sea or the lake. So when the river mouth is flooded or occupied by sea water, then it forms that funnel-shaped extension of the sea, So if we have something of this kind, so if this was our river, that the river mouth is wide, because when the river is flowing into the sea or the lake, in that lower end or the last bit of it is flat. So when it gets there, the water spreads widely. So you have a wide river at the mouth. Now when the sea level rises, so if this side is where we have the sea, when sea level rises, then it is this river mouth that gets occupied by the waters of the sea that have risen. And therefore, this funnel or V-shaped river mouth along the coast is what we call an estuary. And an example of it is along the mouth of River Rufiji. So River Rufiji is that river in Tanzania that joins the Indian Ocean, is one which has got an estuary. And trying to check if you can find an image here. An image of an estuary. That image there, I try to bring out the idea we're trying to say. In the background, that's where the river is coming from, but then in the foreground, that is where we have the water body. So the water of the sea extends into the river valley, but you find that as you go into the background, the river is narrow but opens up as you come down into the ocean or the sea or lake. So that section there is what we are calling an estuary. Having talked about submerged and submerged coasts with the rivers and estuaries forming, there are even other features that we cannot go into details of. But then we also now look at those features that form as a result of a fall in sea level. Those are emergency coastal features. Now, without saying too much, along the coast, we have already seen that we have features formed by wave erosion. We also have features formed by wave deposition. Now, most of these features, or some of these features, are right along the coast. They are at the coast, just touching in contact or not in contact with water. Now, assuming we are talking about those that are in contact with water, for example, talk of the cliff. So the cliff is that steep rock face along the coast, overlooking the water level. You have the cave, a cylindrical opening into the coast. That tunnel, which is horizontal into the coast. We have features like the wave cut platform, which forms at the base of the cliff because of the collapse of materials on that steep surface. We have the beach we have just talked about, which is along the coast. Now, just imagine we have those features in contact with water. Now the water level eventually goes down, reduces. What happens is that those features that were formerly in contact with water will remain above the water level, and therefore they form features which are said to be features of coastal emergency. So we simply say those features have risen above the water level. So we call them raised coastal features. So you'll be talking about a raised cliff, meaning that the cliff has been left above the water, so it becomes a raised cliff. We talk of a raised cave, meaning that the cave that was formerly in contact with water, because we said even within the cave the wave waters will come and enter there, drill a hole through its roof to form a blowhole. And when the roof collapses, eventually we have an inlet called a geo. Now, when sea level falls, the waters of the waves will no longer reach the cave, because the cave has been left above the water level because of a fall in sea level. So we have a raised cave. Our beach continues to grow because as the materials are broad, because it is just adjacent or next to the water body. Now when the water levels reduce, it means that water is far from the beach, meaning therefore that we can no longer have deposition taking place here. So that beach which is left above the current or the present water level because of a fall in sea level will also be called a raised beach. So in simple terms, we are saying that coastal emergency because of a fall in sea level simply exposes or raises the coastal features that are already in existence. So we simply describe them as raised. So the raised cliff, raised cave, raised beach, raised wave cut platform all form as a result of a fall in sea level, and those are the features that characterize or that represent the effect of coastal emergency, represent a fall in sea level. So in this category, we are not going to dwell so much on it. In this category of features formed from sea level changes along the coast, we have the риas, we have the estuaries, then we're also talking about these that form as a result of fall in sea level, raised cliff, raised cave, raised wave cut platform, raised beach, and etc. etc. That is our third category of landforms. As we rush through in the remaining minutes, I want to take you to the fourth and last category of features or landforms that form along the coast, so that we beat our target of having this topic of coastal landforms covered in this lesson. That is the last one we said are the coral reefs. Now, coral reefs may not necessarily be landforms, and I want to assume that we have ever talked about coral reefs. We must have given these ones as an example of organically formed sedimentary rocks when you're talking about rock formation. So one of the rocks that form as a result of organic accumulation of materials, accumulation of organic materials, are the coral reefs, or you can call them coral rocks. So in simple terms, we are talking about rocks that form along the coast. And here we are specifically talking about the sea coast. We're not talking about lake shores, because lakes have fresh water. So we are only talking about the sea coast, that land, that piece of land that borders the ocean or the sea, not the lakes, because we cannot talk about, say, coral reefs along the shores of Lake Victoria, Lake Albert, because these ones have got fresh water where the conditions of freshness cannot allow the formation of coral reefs, as we shall see. So coral reefs, in simple terms, are simply limestone rocks which are made up of skeletons or remains of tiny or small water organisms, or marine organisms for that matter, which are known as polyps. Now, polyps, we are saying these are tiny or minute organisms that live in water, that live in salty waters of the sea, and their skeletons or bodies are made up of calcium carbonate, or calcium for that matter, which calcium carbonate is extracted from the salty water of the sea. So these materials, or these skeletons or remains of the polyps, will drop as the polyps die within the water. When they die, you may ask what makes them die? Just that is like their life cycle. They live in water, reach a time, die, and when they die, their skeletons or remains drop on the continental shelf the continental shelf, I think you must have also talked about this one in fishing, British Columbia, a wide, shallow continental shelf. That part of the sea or the ocean near the coast where it is still shallow. That's where fishing can take place, because it's sometimes some of the methods of fishing cannot be effective in the deeper waters. So fishing is very effective along the coast where the water body is still shallow. That section there is called the continental shelf, an extension of the mainland into the water body, but at the bottom. So when these materials accumulate on the continental shelf along the coast, they accumulate over time, then get compacted together and cemented to form a limestone rock called a coral rock or coral reef. Now, these rocks will not form everywhere where there is water. They only form under special conditions. And very quickly, we go through the conditions or factors that favor the formation of coral reefs. They are captured in our notes. You see this? Let's rush this through this very fast. One of the conditions is that there should be presence of warm water temperatures. So warm water temperatures of not less than 21 degrees Celsius. And this is necessary for the proper growth of the polyps. So polyps can only survive under warm conditions, not cold conditions. So the temperatures must be above 21 degrees Celsius. The other condition is presence of clear or clean water that has no sediments. Clear, clean water with no sediments that allows sunlight to penetrate to the bottom of the sea. So sunlight should be able to penetrate to the continental shelf because there is need for the light. If you want to know what's the light for, these are living organisms. They need the light, but they also feed on some plants that grow within the water. These plants are called the planktons. So the planktons, being plants, need light for their growth. You know that one scientifically. So we are saying there should be clear water that can be penetrated through by light to reach the bottom of the sea for the planktons to grow, on which the polyps will feed. And when eventually they die, they provide materials for the formation of coral reefs. The other condition is presence of salty water for calcium formation, because we say that these polyps have bodies that are rich in calcium carbonate, or calcium for that matter, and then this calcium is extracted from the salty water. So there must be presence of salty water. Then the other one is presence of abundant planktons for the polyps to feed on. I've already mentioned that these are plants in the water that the polyps feed on, because these polyps will not live in the water without their food. So their food are the planktons, which must be in abundance. Then the other one is presence of well oxygenated water for the survival of coral polyps. So these polyps, being organisms, need oxygen for their survival. So there should be enough oxygen in the water for these polyps or water organisms to survive. Then presence of a large stable continental shelf, which acts as a platform on which skeletons of polyps accumulate. So this ground, which is the continental shelf, must be firm, strong, that it will be able to allow accumulation of the remains or skeletons of the polyps. The other condition is presence of shallow water to allow penetration of sunlight again, because the water should not be too deep, because even if the water is clear but too deep, it means the sunlight may not reach the bottom of the sea. So it means the continental shelf needs to be shallow so that the sunlight can reach the bottom and therefore enable the planktons to grow on which the polyps feed. And then presence of calm, or that is calm water, meaning that the water is still, the water is not so much disturbed by waves. So this allows accumulation of the skeletons, because if there are strong waves that disturb the water, then the skeletons, as they accumulate on the bottom, they are washed away by the strong waves. So the water must be calm. Then, given those conditions, if those conditions are present, then we have corals forming. These corals are in three types. There are three types of coral reefs, and these ones are, the first one are the fringing reefs. The other one are called the barrier reefs, and then the third one is called the atoll reef. Now, the fringing reef is one that forms near or very close to the coast. So it is a rock, a limestone rock along the coast, which is very near or close to the coast, and it is separated from the coast or from the mainland by a shallow and narrow lagoon. We have already talked about a lagoon. So between the coast and then the reef, that rock, there is a very narrow and shallow lagoon. We say the lagoon, that part of the sea that is cut off. So the rock cuts off part of the sea, but that part which is cut off is shallow and narrow, or small for that matter. And we have an illustration in our notes. You can view it and you will take it in the notes that shows an illustration of that fringing reef. And the examples we have are Tiklifi, Shanzu, and the Tiwi. All these ones are found along the coast of Kenya. Then that's the coast of East Africa. Then the other type we are saying is the barrier reef, is one which forms far from the coast. And for it is separated from the coast by a deep and wide lagoon. So here we said the lagoon is shallow and narrow. Here we are saying the lagoon is deep and wide, because for it forms slightly far from the coast. That is one we call the barrier reef. And the best example we have in East Africa is found at Mayotte, along the coast of East Africa. We have an illustration there. Now when we are illustrating these two, compare that of the fringing and that of the barrier. And then the third one is called the atoll reef. The atoll reef, this is a circular or a ring-shaped coral rock that forms very far from the coast, and for it encloses a deeper and wider lagoon. So for it, it's not near the coast, it's very far from the coast, so it is circular, and therefore it forms or it encloses that part of the sea with the that part of the sea enclosed will form. So in between here we have a deep and a wider lagoon. So these are the three types of coral reefs. So our last category of the coral reefs, we have the fringing, the barrier, and atoll reefs, which all exist only along the coast of East Africa, because it is only possible for corals to form in salty waters of the sea, not in fresh waters like in our lakes. And then the last bit there in our notes, you're going to see us talking about the importance of coral reefs and perhaps the problems or the negative importance. I believe that those ones are clear. You can read through, you can understand them. We said coral reefs provide raw materials for cement manufacturing. We said they are made up of limestone, not so? Yes. And limestone is a raw material for the formation, or for the manufacturing of cement. Then we said they protect harbors from strong winds. So those pots, the rocks, the coral rocks will stop the waves, the strong currents or waves from reaching the pots. So we are also saying they form lagoons, which are used for fishing and recreation, like swimming. We said they act as tourist attractions and therefore bring foreign exchange to the East African countries. They're used for study and research purposes. They prevent sharks and other dangerous aquatic animals from coming near the coast to attack people. Then these ones also are quarried and used for construction purposes. So you break them into blocks, and therefore they use them for construction. When you go to coastal areas like Mombasa, Dar es Salaam, you'll find structures built using coral rock pieces. Then when they weather down or break down, they form soils that have enabled the growing of cashew nuts, palms, coconuts, and cloves, etc. Then they form islands which are used for settlement, because Pemba and Zanzibar are basically made up of coral rocks. Then they're used for souvenirs and decorations. You find people using them. Unfortunately, I forgot mine. Would have showed you a sample of a coral rock. And then there are problems there, that they obstruct navigation, they limit fishing, they destroy fishing nets, they form infertile soils which support growth of limited crops, and those lagoons they form also act as breeding grounds for disease vectors. Having talked about all the categories of coastal landforms, we can now say comfortably that this is a topic that we can count to have been covered in Geography Paper 1, that is Physical Geography of East Africa. So I want to request you to read through, understand. For 2 expectations. 1, you expect a structured question on coastal landforms, and the most common one here are always the coral reefs. And then you also need to read and understand coastal geomorphology or coastal landforms in preparation for questions in part 1, objective questions, because these are also very common there. Be keen about the examples that we have given in each case.